Right. Okay. And so you got on the LST with
Well,
what kind of LST was it? Was it with?
Well, LST is landing ship tank.
Right. So you were
And that's
with
the
tanks.
ship that has the big doors that open in the prow.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that, and then a ramp can come down, and then the tanks or vehicles can roll off.
Right.
And the reason we were on that is because we have, of course, all our heavy equipment too.
Mm-hmm.
Trucks, graders,
Construction
bulldozers.
equipment. Right.
So we were all a complete unit.
Right.
On that.
So what was
vessel.
on this LST? You had the equipment. About how many soldiers were on the?
There probably were 2 engineer companies on that LST.
Okay. So you all were pretty packed in also with the equipment and everything.
We were pretty packed in, is right.
Right.
We left the harbor at dusk, and of course we were all then trying to find a place to lie down and get some sleep. And some guys discovered that the canvas on a 2.5-ton truck, if you lay in between the bows, that was a nice place to sleep because it was kind of comfortable. It was like a hammock.
Yeah.
What they didn't realize until the morning was that truck was parked right at the rail.
I see.
If you'd moved too much, you'd have been over into the brink. Anyway.
So this was about D plus what? Do you know about how many days after the invasion?
To the best of my recollection, it was maybe D plus between 8 and 14.
Okay. Okay.
And we landed at Utah Beach.
Mm-hmm.
And it couldn't have been longer than that because they didn't run us up far enough on the beach to get our equipment off. So we had to sit there, wait for the tide, back off, and try again.
Mm-hmm.
That time we made it. So we got off, and of course we left the beach and went to an area where we could stay, not too far away, short distance. We were told, stay right here. And of course, there's always the guys that ignore an order like that and decide to explore a little bit. And several of them came running back, whisper, whisper, whisper. And the word got passed around, and the CO heard it, and he said, show me.
Mm-hmm.
What they were saying, that we found dead Jerrys.
Mm-hmm.
So they took the CO to show him the bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, okay, fine, now dig graves and bury them.
Mm-hmm.
So it couldn't have been that long after D-Day if there were still bodies on the surface yet.
Now, were you off the LST?
Yeah.
Okay, so what did you see? What do you remember seeing? What was it like 2 weeks after the invasion? Did you see a lot of the destruction, a lot of the death?
No.
Yeah.
Our troops, first of all, Utah was compared to Omaha was an easy beach.
Exactly. Yeah.
Omaha was the one that where the casualties were enormous.
Exactly. Right.
So any U.S. that was either wounded or killed by that time were off the beach.
We're off.
And of course, if they were wounded, they were trying to get them back to England to hospitals as quickly as they could.
Right. 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 So what they reported was dead Germans that
still had not been taken care of.
Yeah.
Obviously, they were last on the priority list.
Right. So were you involved in burying some of these?
No. Only the guys that discovered them had that task.
Had that task, I see.
That was the last dead German they ever found.
Yeah, right.
Several hours after that, we were told we were going to march, and we marched through the night, good part of it, until we came to what turned out to be a big open field, and we were told we were going to spend the rest of the night there, pitch your pup tents. And of course, by that time, it had started to rain. So we pitched our pup tents in the dark, And we stayed over there all night, and then in the morning we got up and we got, I don't know how we got fed. Maybe we had just K rations.
Mm-hmm.
In any case, we then loaded up on trucks and were driven to a site further inland. And our first task there was to build like a tent city for a headquarters of some sort.
Right.
And after that was accomplished, I don't know what happened next.
You were kind of an independent outfit, right? I mean, as far as you were a construction company, were you under the command of any specific general? You weren't Third Army by now or anything like this.
I don't know.
Uh-huh. Okay.
No, we wouldn't have been Third Army.
No.
We would have been First, if anything.
Right.
In fact, I think at one time I was wearing a First Army patch.
I see. Okay.
At our level, we really didn't know much or weren't exposed to the chain of command.
Mm-hmm.
It stopped with our officers.
Yeah. Right. You were just what rank were you now? Were you still a corporal? Or?
I was a corporal.
Still a corporal. Okay.
Two-striper.
Right. Right. So you built a tent city.
We built Tent City, and that was the end of that task. Then we were told we got a new assignment. We're going on the military pipeline, and that was the pipeline that they used to pump the gas up to the front. And they had a pumping station every 5 miles. The task I was assigned was to learn to be a pump and engine mechanic. We had 3 4-inch lines. We had 4 sets of 3 engine pump units per line. And the idea was that it would use a centrifugal pump, take the gas that had come from the station downstream and increase the pressure through these 3 pumps and pump it another 5 miles to the next station. We had two of the lines were 80 octane and one was 100 octane. That obviously was for tanks and aircraft.
To get the gasoline to the front for aircraft and tanks. Yeah,
right.
Okay.
The 80 was for other vehicles.
Right. Right.
So I became a pump and engine mechanic.
Which means when it broke, you fixed it?
No, what it meant was that there were 7 of us. 7? No, there were 4 of us in groups. Every day we would be taken to a different pumping station where we would do a maintenance job on the engines. That meant checking that they were running well, shut them down, either change or wire brush and reset the spark plugs, check the oil, and make sure that the gas lines were working. They were fed gas from the casings of the pumps.
And each pumping station had 12 engines?
Each pumping station had
4 pipes?
Yeah.
3 engines each?
12. One was a reserve.
Right.
And which, when we would go in, we would shut one group down to work on it, and we would throw some valves so that then the reserve would come on, and we would go through that maneuver, and it took us a day at each station.
I see.
We would go first thing in the morning, come back around 5 or 6 at night, having done that station. The next day we would go to another station.
And they were about 5 miles apart.
Right.
And how would you march there? Would you
No,
ride on
we
trucks?
We were trucked there.
You were trucked there. Okay.
Yeah.
So they didn't make you hike 5 miles and then work. Yeah.
It might have been not so bad going to the first one,
Yeah.
but the second one would have been 10 and then 15.
Yeah.
That would take
Yeah,
too long.
it would have gotten, yeah.
It would have taken you all day to get to the last one.
Right.
So that's what we did.
Would you sleep there at the station after you finished your
No,
work?
we went back to company headquarters every day, every night.
Every night. Oh, I see. And then you headed.
The next day.
So every day your trip got longer.
That's right.
Yeah, I see.
Every day it got longer.
Yeah.
Eventually, somebody got smart and said, we're wasting a lot of time taking these guys to each station. So they decided that they would assign a mechanic to each station, and that's where he would live with the rest of the operating personnel. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we did.
Yeah.
And actually, that was really good, as far as I was concerned, really good, because I wound up at a station where they had found these prefabricated German hut building panels. And so I inherited a hut from somebody else. And that was all mine.
So you had a little home. You had a little apartment.
Apartment. And I like to read. And so you would either try to get candles or a bottle of gas with a piece of rope in it.
Right.
And finally, I got smart. We were near a railroad, and I had discovered, I used to enjoy going out and walking around the countryside a little bit. I found that there was a car that had been hit by a train, and the wreckage was there by the tracks, by a road crossing. And I got smart. The car still had the battery. The headlights were still good. And I realized that if I took the battery and the headlight, I could rig a light for myself. And so I built a little table and rigged the light above it. And now, instead of using a candle or rope and a bottle of gas, I had a nice light. And as far as charging the batteries was concerned, there were batteries on every one of these engines. So when that battery would run down, I'd just go out and swap it for a charged one.
Yeah.
And so I did that for quite a while.
Did you encounter, up to this time, had you encountered any resistance?
No.
I mean, the war was in front of you, right?
The war was in front of us.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
We were not too far from Saint-Lô, France. That was the big city or town ahead of us. We were there when they decided that they had to make a breakthrough out of the, the French word is bocage. We called it the, the fields had these built-up walls of trees and roots and everything. Hedgerow country.
Right.
So the day that they decided they were going to make the breakthrough, hundreds and hundreds of bombers came over, and they created 3 paths just beyond Saint-Lô, where they just the bombs went like that, just walked ahead, and just blew everything in that path to smithereens. And that's when the armor broke out.
Right. Right.
In the meantime, I had gotten the assignment then to run a small tank farm outside of Saint-Lô. And I guess pretty much about that time, our regimental colonel, decided that if he was ever going to get his star, he had to get his boys close to the front. And so they couldn't just pull his regiment out. Well, fresh engineer troops had come over from the States. And the deal was that he would leave a few people as cadre to train, and he would take 95% or so of his men and leave.
Mm-hmm.
I was not a yes man.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't think something made sense, I had spoken up about it.
Right. Right.
One illustration was when we were back in England and building a camp, my staff sergeant, my platoon sergeant, called me over and he says, "We're going to change your assignment today. You're going to put up this prefabricated building." And he said, "There's all the crates, they tell us, with all the parts in them." And I looked at him and I said, "Fine, how do we know what's in what crate?" "Well, you're going to have to open the crates to find out."
Mm-hmm.
So, because it wasn't the first thing in the morning, the tools from our tool trailer had already been issued.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to go out, myself and a couple other guys, and beg, borrow, and almost take some wrecking bars and some hammers and things like saws so that we could have some tools to work with.
Mm-hmm.
So I can remember the lieutenant, our platoon lieutenant, I don't remember if he was still a second lieutenant or had he been promoted to a first, which meant that our company commander had been promoted to a captain, maybe by that time.
Mm-hmm.
I saw him walking in his trench coat and something sticking out of his left pocket, a roll of paper. The platoon sergeant and I were following, and I said to the platoon sergeant, "By any chance, are those the plans for the building?" "Well, I don't know." I said, "Well, let's ask the lieutenant, because if they are, I want to look at them so I can see what the heck we got to do here."
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was sort of treated as, you shouldn't be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So they wouldn't give me the plans, which, being a draftsman, I could have read.
Right.
So we were left to opening all the crates and looking at what was in them and figuring out how to erect this building, which we did.
Yeah.
Some hours later, we had gotten some of the walls up, and there were trusses for the roof and that. The lieutenant and the platoon sergeant came along, and, "Well, is that all you've got done?" I said, "Well, we're working under kind of poor circumstances here. We don't know how this thing is supposed to go together. You won't let me see the plans." And that made me very popular. So I don't know if it was for that reason that I got selected to be the cadre. Oh, to further the story, because back in England, my men had come to me, the men in my platoon's squad sergeant had been called off for some special duty. And so I was sort of promoted to be acting squad sergeant. And there was another buck corporal with me in that squad. The men in the squad came to me and said, "We think we're getting more than our fair share of KP." So I watched for several days, and I agreed with them. I thought that we were being picked on for KP, which wasn't really a desirable duty. So I went to the platoon sergeant and registered our complaint. Well, he didn't like that either. So anyway, going back to France, I was then selected to be cadre with about 5 or 6 other fellows to train the newcomers.
The newcomers,
And as a result of that, I was promoted to be a station foreman and made staff sergeant.
Okay.
Never was a buck. Went from corporal to staff.
The staff, okay.
And, of course...
What staff is that? 3 above and 2 below?
No, that's a tech sergeant. Staff is 3 above, 1 below.
1 below, okay.
1
that's
below.
Right. Tech sergeant is 2 below, okay. First sergeant is 3 below. Right?
3 below with a diamond.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Now they've got command sergeants and some more that I'm not even familiar with.
Okay.
But, so the war ended in Europe on May 8th, and shortly thereafter, we shut down our pipeline, which started at Cherbourg, because they now had Antwerp. And we shut our pipeline down, and we were given 2 hours notice that the trucks were going to arrive, and we would be packed. We didn't have to take the tents down or anything. Just leave everything there. Just yourselves, your duffel bags to get on the trucks and come into company headquarters. A little aside was that we had a pyramidal tent for a cook tent, mess tent. We had it was either 3 or 4 pyramidals in a row for the men to live in. There was a spring on the hill above us, which we dammed up, and we laid pipe down, built a little shack, got a 55-gallon drum, cut a third of it off, took a full one. In the third, we put a layer of sand and ran a gasoline line to it that we could drip and fire. And the 55-gallon drum we would fill with water from the spring, and we would heat it, and we made a hot shower for ourselves.
I'll be darned. Huh.
That was one little thing we made to make life good.
Very resourceful.
Well, you know, you're going to be there for a while. You're going to try to make life as good as you can.
Sure.
The second thing
I'm sure there were a lot of guys that were very appreciative of your talent there and your ingenuity.
My guys were very grateful. Another instance of what we did is I got the guys to chip in so many francs every payday. And then the cook and I would go down, hike to Saint-Lô, and by that time the French had come back. We're having a market and things, and we would go there and we would buy fresh vegetables and fresh meat, and we would supplement then our army rations with these things that we bought.
Yeah.
And the guys didn't mind chipping in because this was a good deal.
A lot better than the rations.
Sure. What we did is
up the rations.
We used to get Spam. Well, we would save the Spam so that the guys that are on the midnight shift could come over and make a sandwich.
Yeah.
And go back with it.
Yeah.
And that's how we used our Spam.
Right.
But again, you know, you're making life a lot more livable.
Sure.
And the last thing we did, which really took the cake, I guess, in some of my exploring, I had found a German tank that had been knocked out in a field some distance away. And I explored the inside of it and the light bulb turned on. And I went to the motor pool sergeant and I said, I want to borrow a 2.5-ton truck with a front end winch. He said, what do you want that for? I said, well, let me see if it works first. So we drove out there and we got as close as we could to the tank, and we snaked the winch cable out. And if you opened up the tank, there were 2 doors, and then there were radiators in there. And we ripped the radiators out, and below that was a 1-lunger engine with a generator. Now, the generator had been hit with some shrapnel. The 1-lunger was no good. That had been made of some sort of cast metal and partially melted.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, it was on a frame. So we unbolted it, and we got the winch down there, and we rigged the cable to the frame and put a pulley up on the doors, which we tied down, and we winched this thing up, and then we swung it over the side and down to the ground.
It was pretty large. I mean, it was...
The generator was probably about that long and maybe that diameter, and the frame was so wide, so long.
Yeah.
And after we got it on the ground, we snaked it out to where the truck was, and then we loaded it in the back of the truck.
Right.
And then the real project started, because how are we going to drive this generator? So I thought, hey, if we can get a Jeep engine, we can couple it to the generator. And I explored the shrapnel hole and saw that there were some wires, but they were color-coded, and I figured if I joined them together, I could get the output from the generator.
Right.
Well, I got part of a Jeep engine, not quite all of it, but we found some of it was damaged, so I found a repair depot, and if I took damaged parts in, they would give me a replacement part that was good.
Yeah.
And eventually I got all the parts I needed to build a Jeep engine.
I'll be darned.
And then we coupled that up to the generator, and sure enough, we had power. So then we went down to some French homes that had been destroyed, and we went in there and took down the porcelain insulators that they ran their wires on, and got the sockets and bulbs and whatever we could find, and we rigged lights in every one of our tents and in the shower and in the cook thing. So we had lights.
You built your own electric plant.
We built a motor generator. That's right.
You lit the city.
And,
How about that?
When we got orders to move, I asked our CO, I said, you want us to lead the motor generator? He said, no way. He said, we'll send a truck out and we're going to take that with us.
Yeah. It had.
So that went to the Philippine Islands with us.
I'll be darned. It had further uses.
That's right.
Okay, well, take me to... so you were ordered to get on the truck and head back to camp, right?
That's right.
Because the war was... The
war was over, and
right.
obviously we were going to move someplace.
Right.
We didn't know where.
Now give me a date now. We're in the winter of 45, is that right?
No.
Where are we now?
We are in June of 45.
June of 45, okay.
That's right.
Okay. So
June of 45.
All right.
Approximately, say, maybe roughly a month after the war had ended.
After the bulge, after there. Okay.
Yeah, well, the bulge was the winter of 44, 45.
44, yeah, 44,
and
45.
that was a cold winter.
Oh, yeah.
Believe me.
Yeah.
A lot of what I've just said happened in beginning of 45.
So the real cold.
Yeah.
So
because I remember the winter of 44, 45 because I half froze my hands trying to work on engines.
Right. Well, I noticed that it says you served Ardennes in the Ardennes, which
again,
or was that the battle? Yeah.
They divided everything up into campaigns. See,
I see.
I've got. I thought I had to put a copy here, didn't I? Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
If you look at these Normandy
campaigns,
I got an arrowhead for Utah Beach. And then you got northern France, the Ardennes, Rhineland. Each one of those was a star for that campaign. The reason I guess that I got them was that I was still carried on the roster of my 368th.
Right.
We hadn't been transferred yet to the 2823rd EPD company.
Right.
And so the 368th went up and was present in all of those campaign areas.
I see.
And so that's why I was still back at Saint Lo.
Right. Okay. So take me from.
Well, it turned out that after we got back to headquarters, we were only there maybe at most 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
We were loaded on trucks and we were taken to Paris.
Mm-hmm.
And there we were loaded on 40 and 8s, the famous boxcar of the French.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going someplace. Someplace turned out to be Marseille,
Mm-hmm.
where obviously we weren't there for the joyride.
Right.
And we were only there a few days when we were loaded on a ship.
Mm-hmm.
And we sailed the Mediterranean through the Straits of Gibraltar, through the South Atlantic, Panama Canal, across the Pacific to outside of New Guinea, and then from there up to the Philippine Islands, Manila.
How long was this trip?
30 days.
30 days. I would have thought longer. Wow. Okay.
30 days.
Now, what kind of ship was this?
This was an APA, an attack transport built specifically to carry troops.
Right. Were you as packed in as you were before?
Yeah.
Same thing. Just
were
looking
packed.
for a place to sleep. Huh?
We had pipe racks for bunks, and they were 5 high.
Right.
The sailors on board said they had doubled the air conditioning since the last trip.
Right.
At night, everybody tried to get up on deck someplace where it was cool.
Yeah, sure.
Down below, it was so hot, it was pitiful.
So where'd you land in the Pacific? And when are we now? Are we in July? Are we?
Yes, we're in July and in Manila.
Mm-hmm.
And from Manila, we were trucked out to Bataan, where our task was to build a tank farm.
Mm-hmm. When you say a tank farm, that's just a place to store tanks? Is that,
No.
Or is that a
tank farm? This is to store, in the case of the Army, gasoline.
Gasoline tanks. Okay.
Gasoline tanks.
Right.
They would be 5,000 barrel or 10,000 barrel tanks.
Mm-hmm.
And there'd be lines to bring the gas in and lines to draw it out.
Right. Now, did you know at the time when you'd gone to the Pacific, was it presumed then that everything that you were doing was in preparation for an invasion?
Oh, yeah. That was pretty obvious.
Yeah.
That they were going to invade Japan.
Right.
One of these days.
Right. And you were still a 20-year-old kid, 21-year-old, 22.
I was 21 month when I crossed Utah Beach.
Okay. And, but when you got to Japan, you realized that somehow you were going to be part of the invasion.
That's right.
You knew that was going to be a pretty nasty deal because that was a whole different war in Japan.
That's right. By that time, we were not looking. Those of us that had been in Europe for quite a while and had participated in essence in one invasion were not looking forward to another.
Right.
But of course, that was just a handful.
Right.
Of us that were the original cadre for this.
Right. So you set up the tank farm in Bataan.
You're right. That's
okay.
That was our task.
That was your task.
Right.
And when you say set up, what does that mean? I mean, you actually
have to clear the ground.
Clear the ground.
And prepare a bed or foundation. And then start erecting these steel plates that are prefabbed, sent to you, curved, and you bolt them together and with a rubber gasket at each joint.
Right.
So that you seal them.
Right. And how many tanks are in a farm? Or
that can vary depending upon what they want the capacity to be.
Right.
In Saint Lo, I had 2 tanks.
I
don't know how many were planned for the one in Bataan.
Right. But so you were doing that when when the bomb was dropped?
That's right. In August, the 2 bombs were dropped,
Mm-hmm.
and Japan surrendered.
Right, right. And that was a good time. That was good news.
All of us breathed a big sigh of
Sure.
relief. Believe me, we did, because
Yeah.
we weren't looking forward to it.
Right, right.
Subsequently, after that, recruiters came through and were looking for people who would enlist in the regular army
Mm-hmm.
to, I guess, become part of the Army of Occupation.
Mm-hmm.
And they approached me and asked me if I would sign up. I think it was for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd get an automatic 1-stripe advance right away.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yeah, I'll sign up. Because I thought, well, this ought to be interesting. I because I was not combat,
Mm-hmm.
I consider myself very fortunate.
Mm-hmm.
But then you didn't have a choice of what you did, really.
Right.
You were assigned a job, period.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed wherever I went. I enjoyed England. I got a chance to go to Scotland on a 48-hour pass once. I liked the English. My attitude was that you were a guest in these countries.
Mm-hmm.
And with that attitude, if the people met you and found out what you were like, they took you into their homes.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were just as curious about you as you were about them.
Right.
And that was a way of learning.
Right.
And if I had some free time, I used to hike the countryside in France and that to see what it was like.
See what was
to
there.
meet people, to
Right.
learn.
Yeah.
I met a French family up there, and every Sunday I would go to their house to have dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And they had some young children, so I always try to manage to take a few chocolate bars or a couple of oranges or something like that to the children.
Mm-hmm.
And of course that made a big impression on the parents.
Right.
And so we got along with my high school French got overworked.
Yeah. So you said, yeah, you'll sign up, but yeah.
I want a furlough home
Uh-huh.
because I'd had, in all of that time, I'd had 1 3-day pass,
Uh-huh.
which had taken me to Paris.
Right. So you hadn't been home since you
No,
left in 43.
over
before.
2 years.
Right. Right. Over 2 years.
And they said, well, gee, we can't do that. We haven't got room on the ships.
Mm-hmm.
I said, what do you mean you can't do it? Well, we can't. As in retrospect, I think about it, is they didn't want to let go of you if they had you. Because if you got to the States, who knows what would have happened.
Right.
So my response was, well, I got the points. I guess I'll just go home, period.
Yeah.
Which is the way it turned out.
Right.
They instituted that point system with my time overseas and campaign stars and that. Why,
So you went home in November? It says here.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just about, it was after Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
took
Well, it
us
says
up,
here
they-
November 27th is when you departed
Yeah.
and arrived December in the U.S.
Right. Does it give a date?
December 15th, before Christmas.
Yeah. We were headed to San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And Frisco got loaded with troop ships. They couldn't even take the men off. They had to stay out there in the harbor on the ships.
Yeah.
So they diverted us to Seattle.
Uh-huh.
And we went up and were offloaded there and went to a place called Fort Lawton, which was outside of Seattle. And We stayed there for a few days while they were organizing the groups that they had to go to different sections of the country.
Mm-hmm.
They would organize a whole trainload that would go here or there, someplace.
Yeah. So how'd you get back to New Jersey? By train?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We got loaded on a troop train, and we were on that train about 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
They pulled us over into sidings to let every fast freight go by.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
We got to Fort Monmouth on Christmas Day morning.
Really?
And we said, "Where are the passes?" And they said, "We got a big dinner all fixed. You guys have got to stay here and eat it, and then we'll get passes."
Had you been able to contact home when you got to
No.
Seattle or anything like that? They
No.
didn't. So they didn't know.
I hadn't attempted, I guess. Maybe we could have. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you don't know if you call your folks. What do you tell them?
Yeah.
I'm back in the States. I'm up here, but I don't know anything more than that.
Right.
So I didn't say anything until we got to Fort Monmouth, and then I called.
On Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That was a nice Christmas present for
sure was.
for your family.
Except
Yeah.
it turned out that my mother and father had left Cranford and had gone to Bayonne to be with their parents for Christmas Day.
I see.
So when I got to Cranford, I found that out. So I called them again, and I said, "I'll get the first train," and they met me at the train station in Bayonne.
I see. So y'all had a little bit
Of reunion.
there at Christmas time.
Right, and then
That's
I had
good.
to go, the next day I had to go back to Fort Monmouth,
Right.
and I was then discharged.
Discharged. Yeah, on the 28th it says here.
I forgot to tell you one
Yeah.
thing. I got my first full Army pay in English money.
Is that right?
Well, I was in about only 3 months,
Yeah.
and I was in England.
Right.
I think the date that they have here for when I left the States is inaccurate. My remembrance is that I landed in England sometime in September. I think the date they have here may have been for the headquarters company.
I see.
In other words, we didn't all necessarily go on the same boat.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So what did you so you're a civilian again, and what'd you do then? You didn't go back to school? You just decided to get a job, or what'd you do?
The first thing I did was I joined the Army Reserve in an unassigned pool.
Yeah.
But that reserve pool was located in Kearney, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
So I had no real obligations. I would get mail from them periodically.
Yeah.
Yes, I went home. They had what they called the 5220 Club for GIs.
Mm-hmm.
You could get $20 a week for 52 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Within 2 weeks, I had a job as a draftsman.
Right. Yeah, because that $20 wasn't gonna.
That wasn't for me.
Yeah.
I renewed some old contacts from
Right.
where I had worked before I went in service.
Right.
They were working at a company in Newark, a small company, and they were looking for somebody like me. So I went there and started to apply my trade. And yes, I did go back to night school then.
Mm-hmm. So you stayed as a draftsman? That was your career? That was your...
No.
What was your career?
No.
No?
That's another whole story if you want to hear it.
Well, quickly. I mean, what was
Okay.
your career?
Within a few months, that company didn't have the financing, folded.
Mm-hmm.
I got another job at what was called liquid conditioning in Linden, New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
where I was one of two people in the mechanical department. There was an older man who was my boss, you might say, and myself. And we did all the mechanical drawings. Most of the guys were there doing liquid conditioning, did water treatment commercial for big industrial plants, where they conditioned the water for whatever product the plant was making. One of the chief things I did at this liquid conditioning, my boss, in a sense, was coasting. He was an older man, and he was coasting. The one engineer that I had, they only had two. The guy who was running like office manager was an older man, and he was an engineer. And then they had this other younger person who was probably mid-30s. He was mostly electrical, but doubled in mechanical. And he took a liking to me, and he found out that I had capabilities in that. So he wanted to design a series of valves. And so he gave me some formulas, and I used those to work out a 2-inch, a 3-inch, a 4-inch, and a 5-inch valve by scaling up. And I did all of the drawings for all of those valves. He would come periodically and check with me and say, "Hey, you're doing great, you're doing great." Then they wanted to automate some of those valves, and so I designed the electrical cabinet and that for the relays and everything to automate them. And then they were looking for somebody to make those cabinets for them, and they went out and got bids, and they thought they were much too high. So he came to me and he said, "You think you could, if we got the cabinets made, fabricated, so could you assemble all these things and wire them up and that?" I said, "Sure, I can do that." So I got a second job. I would do that at night. I gave him a quote, and I was an independent contractor.
I see.
And I wired up all of these cabinets. I did the first one myself, and then I labeled every wire, and I made some strips of wood with nails, and I tagged them, and I put one on each of these hooks. And I hired a buddy of mine who worked there, and he was helping me, and I said, "We're going to make X number of these wires right down the line." He had a sample, and that's how we fabricated everything. And then we wired everything.
I'll be darned.
And produced them.
How long did you do this?
I was there, let's see, about 2 or 2.5 years. And then a big outfit from Philadelphia called Permuted bought this smaller outfit out, but really to get the patents that they had. So most of the people were let go. A few were held, but most were let go. So that's when I looked for another job and wound up, again, following a couple of buddies at an outfit called Stavitt Engineering, which was located at that time in Greenbrook, New Jersey. They were an electronic outfit, and I signed on there as a draftsman. I almost didn't work there because I wanted $75 a week, and the chief draftsman said he was only authorized to pay $70. So we were $5 apart, and I wasn't giving in because I knew I had the talent.
Right.
Some days later, I got a call from what was then the treasurer of the company. It was a very small company yet. Turned out I was like the 65th employee. And he had an office in Plainfield. And he said, "Bob, will you come down?" And he said, "This is George." I forget his last name. "Would you come down and talk to me in my office?" I said, "Sure." I figured I had nothing to lose. So I went down and talked to him. And I guess I impressed him. He said, "I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal." He said, "If you can do what you say you can do, in 3 months, you'll have your out of $5.
Mm-hmm.
I said, yeah, I'll take that. I think it was just over a month the $5 showed up in my paycheck.
That's good.
And that was, they say, the start of a whole new thing.
Yeah.
I worked in their drafting room, and then they were growing by leaps and bounds, and they did a lot of work for Bell Telephone.
Uh-huh.
They built a new building in North Plainfield, New Jersey, right on Route 22. And I went there, and I was a design draftsman, and then I became a checker, and then I moved over to the field division to design instrumentation, and they were what do you call it, job shopping people up to Bell Labs in Murray Hill. Have you ever heard of Murray Hill?
Mm-hmm.
That's where the transistor was invented.
I see.
And they came to me and they said, "We have a chance to place you up there in a design group. Would you like to go?" And I said, "Sure." I figured it was a change of scenery, maybe a chance to advance.
Yeah, right.
So I went up there. And it was a small group in a fairly large office. And they brought a drafting board in for me so I could do whatever they wanted. 1 week later, the engineer who ran that group came to me and he said, "You know too much. You're too good." He said, "We got draftsmen downstairs." He said, "You sit at that desk and you design for us."
Mm-hmm.
That was the start.
Yeah.
I designed for them. Their draftsmen found out that I knew more because we had worked for Bell as a subcontractor.
Yeah.
I knew more about their drawing system than they knew. So they would come up to me and constantly ask me questions or say, "Would you come down to the drafting room and look?" And he knew all this was going on, but he figured, heck, I was helping Bell do these things. So I was there, and he put me behind a desk. Well, those contracts ran out. Bell didn't renew them, so I went back to the home office in North Plainfield.
Right.
Only by that time, the field division had condensed a little bit, so they put me in one of the regular engineering departments in mechanical, behind a desk. No more draftsmen. And I became a designer.
I see. How long did you do that?
19 years.
Yeah.
I'm the designer of some electronics, avionics that went in the B-47.
Mm-hmm.
Every model of the B-52 bomber.
Mm-hmm.
The F-105 and the C-5 Galaxy.
I see. How about that?
And after again, because I wasn't a yes man, I was the lead engineer on those programs.
Right.
And I developed a completely new concept for the C-5 work. GLAC, which was an arm of Lockheed, and it was building the C-5, had gone to LMSC, which was the Lockheed Missiles and Space Division, to do the avionic, this particular type of avionics for the C-5. And they weren't quite happy with the information they were getting back.
Yeah.
And so they came to LEC one day, and they knew me already. So they had a cross-section of what LMSC was proposing. And LMSC would give them a weight, and the C-5 was overweight.
Your military service, and I know that your post-war service is fascinating also. Let me ask you: do you have any photographs or any kind?
I only had one in all my service, and I don't even know where it is.
Is that right? Like an official photograph or anything like
Yeah,
that?
it took me in suntans
Yeah.
when I was still at Fort Niagara.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You have no idea where it is or any photographs at all?
No.
If you find anything, by chance, if you run across anything, bring it tomorrow because we can shoot a picture of it.
I wouldn't even know where to look.
Yeah, for anything.
I know there's a box of photographs in this house someplace. I don't know where my wife put it, and I have not spotted it.
I see. Okay.
And you can see why.
Yeah, I can understand. That's fine. That's not a problem at all because we've got plenty to talk about in 28 and a half minutes. So what we'll do tomorrow is we'll move along, and I'll guide the conversation, and you talk about it. Don't worry about how you talk because if you're going too long and we need to move on chronologically,
you'll tell me.
I'll move you on. We'll move on. We'll just talk pretty much like we're talking now.
I got plenty, I guess, to say about my experience.
It's a fascinating career on construction because people just don't realize, that those tanks and airplanes didn't just run on their own, over in Europe. They needed fuel and they needed to get there somehow. So,
I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but until they captured Antwerp and could run tankers right in, the gasoline came from England through flexible rubber hoses all the way to France.
Yeah. Wow. Huh.
Yeah, maybe you've seen pictures of huge reels with these flexible hoses on
right.
that they were towing with a ship and paying out as they went.
Like fire hoses or garden hoses or fire hoses almost like, right? Yeah.
Well, they were I don't know the exact construction, but I can visualize that they had a rubber liner, some sort of a steel, whether it was a mesh or a convoluted middle section, and then another rubber liner over that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that they could withstand the pressure, but still be flexible, and they could wind them on these huge drums. These drums must have been, I would guess, maybe 4 stories high.
Yeah.
That they could run this on, and then of course they have to stop and attach another, take that drum and put another drum in place and hook the 2 hoses together and then start up again. Yeah. But that's how they got the gas from England to France.
Yeah. Do you know where KAMU radio is on campus?
Well, now,
let me draw you.
I'm familiar with the TV station there. It's right on Houston Street.
Exactly. That's where we're going. That's where it is. Okay. You know where that is?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's a parking lot as you turn in their driveway. There's one on the right.
Right.
Because you got to go in the front door.
Exactly. You got it exactly. That's
I've
exactly
been there.
Right. If you go down Houston Street, you're going to go off of George Bush.
Yeah.
Turn left on Houston Street.
It's on the left.
And it's on the left, that first building on the left.
Yeah.
And then right beyond that building is the parking lot to the left. It's right, the parking lot is right beyond the building.
Behind the building.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of times there's no room.
Well, I'm going to tell you exactly where to park. If you let me write on. There's a pad. You got something to write with? You got a pen somewhere?
Yeah.
I'm going to show you exactly where to park because you know exactly what we're talking about. Here's George Bush, and there's Houston Street.
Right.
And here's KAMU, the TV station.
Right.
And if you go right in the parking lot right here,
right.
You're talking about back here. There's usually no place to park.
Right.
But if you go right into the parking lot, right here facing the street is about 4 parking places that all have a sign that say authorized vehicles only.
Yeah.
You're allowed to park in one of those. That's for guests of KAMU.
No tickets.
No tickets. Matter of fact, you might get a ticket anywhere else. If you park in one of those parking spaces, you won't get a ticket.
I've parked right up here.
Right. You might get a ticket there if you don't have a parking pass. But if you park in one of those, You won't get touched. That's exactly where you're supposed to park. So just go into the parking lot and you turn into one of those parking spaces right there, and then just walk in the front door.
Yeah.
And we start taping at 2:30. So if you can be there around 2:15.
Yeah.
Tomorrow. And I'll see you then. We just sit down like we're doing right now, and we tape a 30-minute show.
Go in the front door and meet the receptionist and tell
them you're here to do the veteran show, and I should be there by then too to meet you.
Okay.
I should be there.
I'm sorry I don't have any ordnance company on board.
Yeah.
And they decided to keep everybody busy, so they were going to have an inspection of arms. So we fell out on deck, and we had our carbines, and we had learned through experience that you kept almost a dry weapon because it didn't accumulate dust or dirt or anything like that.
Right.
So this ordnance company didn't like our dry weapons. So they gigged us all and told our CO that they would have another inspection the next day, and those weapons better be wet. Well, we made sure they were wet.
Yeah.
Their suntan uniforms had oil splotches all over them because when you let the bolt go...
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We never had another inspection.
That's a way to get out of inspection, right? Oh, my
They
goodness.
learned their lesson. You don't